April 30th, 2000. A small town on New Zealand's North Island is about to change forever. Steven Wallace, just 23 years old, is walking through Waitara's quiet streets. Within minutes, police would fire 5 bullets into his body. The police say it was self-defense. The community says it was murder. And to this day, the case of Steven Wallace remains one of the most controversial police shootings in New Zealand's history.
Tonight, we're going deep into the story. What really happened that night? What did witnesses see? And why do so many people believe the police weren't just protecting themselves?
Waitara, Taranaki, a coastal town known for its history, its river, and its Maori community. But for years, the name Waitara has been tied to tragedy, the death of Steven Wallace. Steven was just 23. By all accounts, he was young, impulsive, and struggling with his emotions that night. But he wasn't carrying a firearm. He wasn't robbing a store. He wasn't hurting anyone. And yet, by the time the sun rose, he was dead. The officer who shot him, Constable Keith Abbott, claimed he had no choice. He told the courts he feared for his life. The law accepted that version of events. Abbott walked free. But here's the thing. Witnesses told a very different story. Some said Steven wasn't charging forward. Some said he was already on the ground when the fatal shots were fired. And others claimed the police lied, colluded, and covered up what really happened. So, was Steven's death the result of a split-second mistake? Or was it something far more deliberate? To answer that, we need to start with the night it all happened. It was just past midnight in Waitara when things began. Steven had been out drinking earlier in the night, and according to friends and family, he was upset, emotional, maybe even out of control. He began walking down the main street, carrying a baseball bat and a golf club. Along the way, he smashed shop windows and a few car windows. Was it reckless? Yes. Was it dangerous? Yes. But it wasn't life-threatening to anyone at that moment. Someone called the police. The first officers to respond were Constable Keith Abbott, Senior Constable Andrew Dombrowski, and Constable Glyn Pierce. Abbott, the officer at the center of this case, would later say he feared for his life. But here's where the accounts start to split. Police said Steven was advancing on them, waving the bat, threatening to kill. Abbott drew his Glock pistol. 5 shots rang out. Witnesses heard the cracks echo through the small town streets. Steven collapsed, bleeding heavily. Now, you'd expect immediate first aid, attempts to save his life. But multiple witnesses said that didn't happen. Some even claimed police stood back, refusing to approach him until it was far too late. By the time help arrived, Steven Wallace was gone. Constable Keith Abbott told investigators he had no choice. According to him, Steven Wallace was advancing quickly, armed with a golf club. Abbott claimed Steven ignored repeated warnings to drop the weapon, leaving him no option but to open fire. Abbott later said, "I believed he was about to kill me." His lawyers painted the picture of a lone officer, isolated, facing a dangerous and unpredictable young man. In court, Abbott argued he had only seconds to react, that the shooting was a lawful act of self-defense, and legally the jury agreed. Abbott was found not guilty of murder. But what if that story wasn't the whole truth? What if key details were hidden or changed to protect Abbott from conviction? This is where things get messy. Because dozens of witnesses came forward, and many of their stories did not match the police version. Some said Steven wasn't charging at all, that he was moving sideways, maybe even backing away. Others claimed he was already on the ground when the final shots were fired. Think about that. If Steven was down and no longer a threat, why keep shooting? Then there were the non-lethal options. Officers had pepper spray. They had police dogs. They had time to contain the situation. Yet none of those tools were used. Instead, lethal force was used almost immediately. And there's more. Constable Abbott claimed he didn't know his colleague, Constable Pierce, was nearby during the shooting, but records suggest otherwise. If Abbott knew he had backup, his claim of being alone and vulnerable begins to collapse. Critics argue this was not just poor judgment, it was dishonesty. That Abbott tailored his story to fit a self-defense narrative. And remember, after the shooting, police closed ranks. Abbott's fellow officers supported his version. Evidence was gathered by police investigating their own. To many, this looked less like justice and more like protection. Keith Abbott was known in Waitara. Some locals nicknamed him Keith the Chief. He had a reputation as a hard cop, sometimes too hard. Whispers circulated that he had a temper, that he drank heavily, that complaints had been made about his conduct. So, was this about self-defense? Or did Abbott lose his temper that night? Some theories even suggest Abbott wasn't aiming for Steven at all, but for his cousin, David Toe, who was nearby. Could it have been a case of mistaken identity in the heat of the moment? Others believe it was execution style. Witnesses described Steven already down when shots were fired into him. This wasn't a quick single shot. This was 5 bullets. Add to that the allegation that Abbott never rendered first aid. Instead, Steven was left to bleed. When you put it all together, it begins to look less like split-second fear and more like intent. When Abbott went to trial, the courtroom became a battleground. The prosecution argued this was reckless, even deliberate killing. The defense leaned heavily on fear, that Abbott was facing a young Maori man with a weapon and had no time to think. In the end, the jury sided with Abbott. He walked free. But the community didn't. Protests erupted. Maori leaders and Steven's family accused the justice system of protecting its own. And they weren't alone. Legal scholars pointed out that ordinary citizens who kill in similar circumstances are often convicted, or at least held to higher scrutiny. Yet here, a police officer was given the benefit of the doubt. Some say too much benefit. Steven Wallace's death became more than a single tragedy. It became a symbol. For Maori communities, it confirmed what they already felt, that police treated them differently, and that the system would never hold officers accountable. For years, Steven's mother, Mariana, fought for justice. Human rights advocates demanded an independent inquiry, but no such inquiry ever came. And today, decades later, people still ask, what really happened that night? Was it justice, or an injustice dressed up as self-defense? So here we are. A young man is dead. An officer is free. And a community is left with wounds that still haven't healed. Was Steven Wallace killed in a tragic split-second mistake? Or was it state-sanctioned murder? The courts gave one answer. The people gave another. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Constable Keith Abbott had no choice? Or do you believe Steven Wallace's death was avoidable? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more deep dives into cases where justice isn't so clear, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for watching.